Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on Podcast Power Players. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. Podcast started out as a niche form of entertainment with low production costs and high potential for millions of listeners and viral views. Now podcasts, both audio and video, are some of the most highly sought after shows anywhere, commanding big budgets, big revenue, and big name talent. Hip-hop artist Tony Yayo burst on the scene more than 20 years ago as a founding member of 50 Cent's G-Unit group. He still performed shows with 50 and was on stage with him in more than 100 cities during his 2023 world tour. When he got back to New York, he appeared on high-profile podcasts like Vlad TV and Kill Tony that drew millions of viewers. Now he has a major deal with podcast powerhouse, The Volume Network, for his own show with fellow rapper Uncle Murda. It's called The Real Report Show.
I get to really express who I am on a podcast, and I think as a rapper, we put on like the suit every day, and we got to be the so-called person. And I just felt like I'll just be myself no matter what it is and just stay humble.
Podcasts have gotten so popular, they now have their own award at the prestigious Golden Globes. Rolling Stone put out a 10 best podcast list for 2025, compiled by senior culture editor Elisabeth Garber-Paul. There's a variety of titles, but many, she says, share common traits.
One of the really cool things about podcasts and that makes podcasting so popular is the most successful podcasts have a very strong point of view. Right? They have someone with an expert take or a lot of personal experience in a particular area.
Dr. Taz is a functional and integrative medicine doctor. Her passion is helping people live their healthiest lives. 3 years ago, she expanded her impact with her own podcast called Whole Plus, which she says is all about community.
I think it creates a collaborative medical community, right? Where like-minded people can come together. And as we all come together and share our common knowledge, then it does change systems and it changes processes over a period of time.
Also creating community, especially for the disabled, is the Quadcast podcast founded by John McAlevey. In 1992, he suffered a severe spinal cord injury that paralyzed most of his upper body. Although he is now able to stand and walk with his canine companion Yokin, he says it's really about inspiration, therapy for the soul, and sharing information about new medical advances.
With some new medications and maybe some new prophylactics, there's some exciting stuff that's on the horizon.
Let's take this to our panel and find out what they have to say. Joining us for this conversation is Tony Yayo. He's a world-famous hip-hop artist, a founding member of G-Unit, and he just signed a major deal with another hip-hop artist, Uncle Murda, with The Volume for their own podcast, which is called Real Report Show. Tony, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. Hi, everybody.
Hi, we really appreciate it. Also with us is Elisabeth Garber-Paul. She's a senior culture editor for Rolling Stone. She has an article that's out now, the 10 best podcasts of 2025. Elisabeth, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. Also with us is Dr. Taz. She is the founder of Whole Plus, that's HOL Plus. She's also the host of the Whole Plus podcast, which is now in its third year. She's a functional and integrative medicine doctor. So Dr. Taz, we're really thrilled to have you on the show.
Thank you, Lisa. Excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Tony, I want to start with you on this because you're a veteran podcast guest, and now you're going to be hosting your podcast, your own podcast show with Uncle Murda, The Real Report Show. Right. What do you like about podcasts? Because you've done you've done tons and tons of TV interviews. You've been on stages all around the world. What is it about podcasts that you're like, I'm in this?
It's like with the music game, I was touring, with 50 Cent and, and we did a big tour in 2023. It was 103 dates. And I started doing podcasts like Vlad TV. And when I was overseas, like I'll be in another country and people would be like, I seen your Vlad interview. So I was like, I thought about it and I'm like, wow, these people are really seeing these interviews, and my numbers was like in the millions. I did like 11 million on Vlad.
Wow.
Kill Tony right now, that interview's at 2 million. Joe and Jada is like 1 million and change. So I just was seeing that I'm revamping myself without really dropping music. I think people care about the music, but I think people want content. So I found myself just being on YouTube and watching different podcasts every day. For me, I just started getting into it, and then I was seeing, the money that was involved in it because everybody's YouTubing or streaming now. And it's cool where, kids that would be on the streets, like a Kai Snot. He's from a kid from the Bronx. He's the dream story of streamers. Like right now he's not streaming, but he's made enough money where he could sit back and relax. And I tell kids all the time, instead of doing something negative in the street, get a computer. Look how far Nori came. Nori was a rapper, and he has Drink Champs, and all you see him do is travel the world with his wife and enjoy, the fruits of his labor. And it's like I think like the traditional times have like changed where even the kids look at it like I don't have to it's not a good thing to say not to go to school, but a person could go to college and a person could be like a YouTuber and wait and make way
Way
more
more money
money.
that way.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, when you looked at the 10 best podcasts of 2025, which were the new ones, the are you surprised that this is now becoming such a big business? You know that there's bidding wars for some of these shows?
I mean, I've been covering podcasts for about 15 years now, and I've been an
Wow.
avid podcast listener for about 20. Actually, my first favorite podcast was Jerry Springer's podcast that he had for Air America back in like 2005, 2006. So I guess I'm not that surprised. I think podcasts are just an incredible way to just an incredible method of entertainment. Um, they're so personal. It feels like you're sitting in the room with them, right? And around, 6, 7 years ago, probably like 2018, 2019, there was another big bubble of investment into podcasts, and Amazon and Spotify were spending a lot of money on Wondery and on Gimlet, spending hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire these podcast production companies. And then we saw that kind of go. And there wasn't as much money being flowed in. But now, I mean, it's just, it's the next wave of it, I think. And people are really discovering that, the chat podcast, when put on video, it's a talk show. Anyone can have their own talk show now.
Dr. Taza, you're using the podcast for like a really a public service and to get the information out there. And tell us about that. What is it? Because you have a very busy practice. What
Right.
inspired you to commit yourself to doing these podcasts?
Well, first of all, I love the space, but I think there were a couple of things that happened here. I came into a very different field of medicine almost 20 years ago, where, I was sort of the quack and sort of the outsider when it came to health and taking care of people. And the amount of disinformation and sort of lack of information that was out there, both on the part of like medical professionals, right, and on the part of patients, to me was a little bit shocking and a little bit jarring. So I think I wanted to close that gap somehow. And the first foray into that was doing broadcast, right? So I did a ton with CNN. I did a ton of Dr. Oz appearances. I still do Today Show, so all this broadcast. But the problem with broadcast is I had 3 to maybe 7 minutes to get my point across,
Exactly.
right? And in 3 to 7 minutes, like all you're really going to do is tease somebody. You're not really going to get into the meat of a conversation and into the depths of a conversation. So podcasting for us was just an opportunity to be like, hey, we need to go deeper. And our community, whether it was our patients or people that follow me or wherever I went, we're like, we want more. We want to understand this better. So that was one motivation. The second motivation was that, as I was out there, like I would get pilot after pilot for like different like Netflix shows or this or that. And they would never really go anywhere because they're like, how do you make health and wellness visual, And the beauty of podcasting and doing it in a talk show format is we don't have to worry about that anymore. The power of the voice, right? Especially for people in the music business, right? The power of the voice and how you deliver information and that conversation has so much magic and energy in it that it can move people.
Stay with us. There's more to come. Tony, in terms of the connection with the audience, the Dr. Taz talks about community. We hear about this term community a lot now. What is it? What have you noticed about the community? Like the hip hop community knew you instantly, but were people skeptical of you at first, or did they go like, "Wow, I didn't know Yayo could talk like that"? Or what were some of the things you
I
were
think
hearing?
I think it was more the wow factor. Like people didn't think that, like, because all rappers, we have this persona, this tough guy persona, that we got loading bullets for breakfast, and it's not really the truth. It's like you get older and you just you learn a lot of things. So I had a lot of war stories, being down with 50 Cents and being around Eminem and Dr. Dre. Those experiences, like I could tell you, I was in a studio with Dr. Dre, one of the biggest producers in the world, like how that was, like being a guy from the neighborhood that never think he would see anything. So I think people, when I explained to them that, like, what I lived my dreams. Like I did everything I wanted to do in life. So I've been blessed, thank God. And I think when I tell them stories of how it was, people just enjoy that.
Elizabeth, the intimacy and the connection with the audio. I know it. I started out in radio and radio talk show hosts and radio news, and it's like people will still stop me, even though I'm on TV every day. They'll TV news every day. They'll be like, they'll go, that voice. I knew that. I know that voice.
Yeah.
It's a different connection, especially when they're meeting you just audio. Tell us about that.
It is, yeah. There's certainly an intimacy in podcasts, right? Because a podcast is with us in these kind of private moments of our day. We're listening to them in headphones when we're taking the subway, or when we're driving in our car, or when we're doing our dishes at home, or when we're taking a shower. And to have these voices and kind of accompany you during those times, I think is very special. And it offers, podcasts are just one of a number of content modes that have blown up in the last few years, right? There's videos, there's TikToks, there's YouTube, there's all sorts of different ways that people are able to share their experiences and their stories with the public. And yeah, to Tony's point, I think that you get to go along on these journeys with people who you care about. Maybe, yeah, you care about their music, but now you're invested in their travel stories.
Taz, tell us about that, because there's so much, a lot of people are like, I can't get my information, or I'm just going to get it off,
Right.
Dr. Internet or Dr. Google. And tell us about the connection that you feel like with your listeners, with your viewers.
It's interesting because, the biggest challenge for me personally, the doctor in front of my name has sometimes instantly prejudiced somebody as like, I'm only here to deliver like facts, right? Like education and a plan. And I need you to do step one, two, and three. But the reality is that that's not how we as humans make change. And that's not really how we as human beings exist in the world. And so for me, it's not just about delivering the information to the audience, right? It's about how can this information, how can you take something, right, from this story and from this like conversation that we're having and bring it into your life on a daily basis. Like I think it's a little bit more difficult in a show, because in a show too, in a typical television show, I think people want to be entertained. But in a podcast, you're almost ready, you're almost more receptive to receiving information, but more importantly, to that space of where, how is this information going to move me forward?
Dr. Taz, in terms of delivering information, what can you tell our viewers and listeners about, consuming it when they're giving medical advice?
And I think everyone is slowly becoming their own doctor with AI, right? So first we had Google Docs and now we have AI Docs, and everyone assumes that those are the right answers. And you have the influencer world, right, of everybody dispensing health information and medical information. It's been really like interesting and frustrating for somebody in my position where, I've worked really hard for my credentials, both in terms of academics, but also in terms of like actually seeing real patients day in and day out. And so, all these people come on to the platforms and it gets so noisy and so crowded there. And I think for the consumer, I think you have to vet who it is that is giving you the information. And while you can have a connection to them and to their story and to their journey, it's all roads don't lead in the same direction, and I think that's really important to remember, that everybody is experience is really their own. Part of the journey and the mission of Whole Plus is, and the reason the name even too, by the way, is Whole Plus, is that we're bringing it all together, right? We're not saying this is good and this is bad and throw this out and have this and all this other stuff. We're saying, okay, here is the medical table, so to speak, what is really relevant to you. And so there's a time and place for everything. There's a time for a supplement, there's a time for an herb, but there's also a time for a medication or a surgery. And so I hope we are sort of that calming space and that grounding space. And we're saying, this is the middle road. This is where we all need to be. Now that you know this, you can make decisions for your own, or hopefully with a good partner that you have in your area.
Elizabeth, do you see any other areas that you think they're going to be growing?
I mean, I think it's interesting that you bring up AI, Dr. Taz, because I do think that there's going to be a shift. 2025 was really kind of a year where we all fell into AI, right? Like it
Right.
became much more accessible. It became something that we all started having conversations about. And I do think we're going to see a little bit of the pendulum swing away from that, because
I
there
agree.
is so much misinformation or hallucinations that AI is having. And I think I'm hoping that 2026, 2027, we're going to see a swing back to human intelligence, right? And
Thank
really
you. Yes.
relying on educated people who have spent time not just studying facts, but also thinking them through. And so I do think that there's a huge opportunity in podcasts to kind of take a step back from AI. Okay, this is what we've learned from ChatGPT, but how do we feel about it as humans?
And also too, I think motivation, because Tony, a lot of the interviews that you've done, a lot of the interviews you've done, you've been really open about, problems that you had in the past, or,
Yeah.
troubling times,
Right.
things like that.
So
And
maybe it could help. Maybe it could help a kid that was in possibly in
Yeah,
my position. So we from New York. So you go to the Bronx, you go to Queens, Brooklyn. A lot of these kids are good kids. It's just they're stuck in an environment where violence is there. So a
absolutely.
kid, a
Yes.
kid, a kid might not even be in the gang. We see it all the time with I think Junior back in the days with with the gang guys. It was mistaken identity. They killed this
right,
kid. Like, or they had an old lady in Harlem that, rest in peace, she got shot in the head. She's just a older lady walking the streets.
right.
So
In a
this stuff
crossfire, in
like,
a gang shootout, I covered that story.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. And Lisa, you on the front line for all these things, so you know what's going on. But if it could help a kid, my story could help a kid, pick a computer or pick up a microphone or stream or podcast, then that's great.
Elizabeth, when the pod, you're covering podcasts, you're covering entertainment, you're covering culture. There's young people watching and listening right now, and even adults that maybe want to change their career track or career path. What do people need to do in order to get a job like yours?
That is a great question. Media is changing a lot, every day. And I think, the core of it is curiosity and wanting to be part of a team. Journalism is a team sport. And if you're interested in being a journalist, if you're young, if you're in school, join your school newspaper. That's how so many of us got our start, and it's really important. And if you don't have a school newspaper, start a school newspaper. If you're a little bit older, start a blog, start talking to people who are covering other things that you're interested in covering. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of social media, right? Like it can be a hellscape out there, but it also is a way to talk to other people who are doing interesting things. Um, do rad things and rad things will happen.
Exactly. Tony, what
Love that.
about for what about for people that want to get into the entertainment business? That's a tough business now. I mean, there's
It's
there's lots.
definitely, it's
Yeah,
definitely, it's a tough business like the NFL or the NBA or any other, kind of sport kind of thing. Or it's just, I would say consistency is the key to everything in success. Just keep
agree.
going. Once you give up, then you never tried.
What can people expect from the Real Report Show, from your new podcast?
I mean, the Real Report Show, I'm like excited. I think it's gonna bring something different. I would love to have guests like Elizabeth and Dr. Taz on there instead of just having like the average rapper on there and just talk about just different things, different worldwide things.
Dr. Taz, for medicine is to get the MD, it's a tough and
Yeah.
very, very long process. And what would you tell somebody that's, say, in college right now or starting college?
I would say don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the journey. Don't be afraid of hard work. There's this like fear. I talk to women who so many times will be like, no, 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 I don't want to do it. It's too long and it's too arduous. Yes, but what isn't in life? Like, I would turn back to either of any of you. Like, was anything easy that you achieved or got? So I think take the fear out of it and go into medicine if it's truly a calling and something that you're really passionate about. If you care and if you can get rid of the fear of the journey, then time goes by doing things that are really, really rewarding. But don't be afraid and always work really hard and always work for the higher good.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on Podcast Power Players. You can watch it again and share it on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page and the free Fox Local app. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.